Once again, thank you for coming on a Saturday. We have a couple of different questions for you, and then we'll go to questions and answers from the audience. The first question is, what is the fourth high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly on NCDs and mental health? So, Mark, do you want to take that one?
Well, I'm kind of shy to answer questions with Bente sitting here on my screen next to me because she is obviously the big specialist on all those topics. But what I see, so this high level meeting is an opportunity for a global commitment around NCD. So obviously with diabetes inside, and I think that's why we should pay attention, and we should also participate, try to participate in the different ways that we find different channels, because this is a global commitment by all the member states of not only WHO but UN, because it's the UN General Assembly. So the head of states will be there. It's not as the World Health Assembly, that is the ministers of health. This is the head of states. So it is a broader commitment, I would say. It is that's why there is the political declaration that is being prepared for this commitment, and that's why it's very important, because so potentially it will affect us all in the world, because our countries will commit with this new political declaration. Bente, please correct me.
No need to correct you, Mark, and so happy to be here together with you as well. You're not only an excellent leader, but also a good friend. So that's so nice. I just want to emphasize one thing, that the difference between the political declaration and what is happening, for example, during the World Health Assembly, is that the political declarations are the only one that is approved by the heads of states and government. So when we are looking for whole of society, whole of government solutions, this is the place to be. So that's why it is so important that we get the language right, because this is the only place that we can look for, where the heads of states and government, the presidents, the ministers, the prime ministers, really are sort of coming together and committing to things. Maybe also to add that this is the fourth high-level meeting on NCD. So the first one was in 2011, and I think we should also recall that it was the second time that health was actually discussed in the UN General Assembly. So it was really noted after HIV and AIDS, the political declaration on non-communicable diseases came. So the first one was really a landmark. The second one in 2014 talked more about sort of a framework that could be used for accountability. The third one added also mental health as a fifth main condition, and also air pollution, and had more focus on strengthening of the health system. This time we need to hope for something that is really actionable. So that was what I would like to add.
Okay. So if I were to explain to my mother, it's a big important meeting in New York in September with various heads of state talking about non-communicable disease, and they're going to agree on something. All right.
That is right.
All right. So second question. So please, Bente, maybe if you could take this one. How can this high-level meeting be used by the people here to improve their own situations? So, for example, diabetes care in their own country.
So it might seem like a strange thing to use so much time and efforts to try to get the language right, but it is really important, because when the heads of states and government agree on something, that's the highest level of accountability. So we cannot hope for anything stronger than that. So, of course, some of you will think about that is in principle, and I think we will discuss that later. So, I hope for very strong language on diabetes, and I have had the chance to look at the draft that is circulating now among member states, because there is an ongoing negotiation just as we speak in New York. And this is something that permanent missions of member states or countries that are in New York that actually are discussing the language. And then it's also involving the member states that don't have a permanent mission in New York by circulating drafts of the political declaration. So that's happening just now. So what we can hope for is, for example, that every aspect of diabetes is considered. And usually a political declaration has principal two parts. One is sort of discussing what is the problem. And the second part, which is the most important, is what are they going to do about it? And what I have seen is that the understanding of the magnitude of the problem of diabetes is actually quite nicely put down. So they mention figures, they look into sort of the very rapid development of diabetes. Of course, you would hope for more nuance, I know that. So it's not sort of speaking about the different diabeteses, it's more like one diabetes, but anyway. And then the second part of the political declaration is where they commit to something. So we are looking for, language like we commit to strengthen, we commit to achieve targets, goals, and so on. And that is the part that is important. I think we will continue afterwards with how can you influence on this, because I think that's the most important thing of this meeting is it's still time for you to put influence into this process. And I hope also we have time to discuss, okay, so what happens after the meeting in September? Because that's, of course, also an important time for you to focus and think how you can change the condition for both prevention, treatment, and also the involvement of people living with diabetes linked to this process.
Okay, thank you, Bente. I took away this is the highest level of commitment. This agreement that they're going to make would be something that they are on paper agreeing to. And I think also people who are following the debates on the draft and everything like that, I think we're going to get into that a little bit later. The next question I have is more of a, in English you would say how the sausage gets made, or in another language how the meal gets made. But when we're talking about large groupings of health conditions, so non-communicable diseases is everywhere from cancer to diabetes, but then we also include mental health. So practically speaking, when we talk about this big high-level commitment, how are the different priorities balanced against each other? And then when it comes to things like, prevention of type 2 diabetes when it can be prevented versus treatment of, say, type 1 or gestational, how is all these priorities and all these different factors balanced with one another?
Do you want to start, Mark?
Yeah, I can so make some comments, though I didn't have access to the new version, and it's important to share that it's not public. So that's why you can't go online and find it, because it's not available. It's only when with member states, and obviously they can make it available to groups or people that they want. But anyway, from the first draft, we look at it carefully to understand so the content, and obviously so you probably saw in the CAP portal of WHO so many responses to the zero draft that was published. So different organizations such as NCD Alliance, World Heart Federation, World Obesity Federation, so us, the Forum of CCNTs as well. So we wrote so some messages to member states or to ministers of health, or so open letters in order to share our opinion on the zero draft. And so answering your question, James, I think so from what we saw in the zero draft, there is let's say a tentative to cover so the different aspects and the different but obviously to summarize, not writing a huge document of commitment, but a summarized document. But obviously also it was interesting regarding diabetes, because there was a meeting in Geneva, because this zero draft was published just close to the time of the World Health Assembly. So there was a meeting that was led by the Global Diabetes Compact team to discuss so the strengths and the weaknesses of the zero draft, and some aspects so were also discussed and so evidenced by that group. But some things that we heard, for example, was that there was no mention to type 1 diabetes in the zero draft. And so obviously people working in type 1 diabetes was a little disappointed, I would say. But something also that caught my attention in the zero draft was that it didn't mention the Global Diabetes Compact itself. So, and well, we have been working, so you are also a big leader there, James. So working with the Global Diabetes Compact, and it's quite, I would say, disappointing not seeing the the commitments in the Global Diabetes Compact there mentioned in the zero draft. But let's hope so those targets are included. Hopefully they were already. So I don't know. I haven't seen the revised version.
Okay. Fair enough. So I'm going to ask the tricky one, which, we are in a time of people doubting the multilateral system, and we have a lot of doubters of these high-level meetings. So, what do you say to people who are skeptical of processes such as these, about large international multi-level processes? And also, do you have an example? Bente, you touched on this a little bit in your opening remark, but of previous high-level meetings on non-communicable diseases and health just in general that have led to positive change. So what do you say to the doubters? And then do you have concrete examples to tell the doubters that there is actually some positivity that can come out of this?
So, James, will we come back to how to influence? Will that be the last question?
You
Could
can
you
get into
remind
that
me?
now too. We'll keep in
Yeah.
mind.
No, because to answer your question, of course, it can always be doubts, but the opposite, not having any UN General Assembly political declaration on health or on non-communicable diseases and mental health would be a very scary scenario. So I would say that, as I mentioned as well, it was a watershed event when non-communicable diseases eventually was highlighted in the first political declaration. Before that, if you remember, before that we had the Millennium Development Goals. They were only focusing on vaccination, on children surviving the first 5 years. Some focus on maternal and child health, but absolutely nothing on non-communicable diseases, not even on diabetes type 1, which should have fitted absolutely perfect in that first Millennium Development Goals. So I would say just the pure fact that we got the first political declaration was absolutely a proof for me that this is necessary and important processes. I think if we look back to the 2018 meeting where we got the inclusion of air pollution, again, of course, it's an obvious horrible development for air pollution, but it had only sort of a attraction in its own small little poaches of environmental people. It didn't really relate to health. And I think for me, the focus was then turned into something very important. We can also see separate, more focused declaration, like, for example, indicators for eye care, which has been a selective declaration. These things really matters. So, of course, we can have both, and everything has to be balanced. If we only work on language and political declaration and pay no attention to implementation, of course, we are making a mistake. So, the power of this is actually that people like ourselves, and especially civil society, I would say, and people with lived experience as well, hold the government's account. So if this political declaration is just approved and then after that nothing happens for 5 years and we have a new political declaration, it goes without saying that nothing will be changing. So it is actually a call to action for all of us. It's not enough that the heads of states are agreeing. We need to follow up. We need to, go back, hold them account, as I said, not only at the global, regional level, but more importantly, at the national and even the local level. That's where we see the change. So, for example, if we choose a completely different area of work, cervical cancer has really shown, this rapid development, and very much also because of the targets. When I looked at the current draft, actually, I can see that the reference to the Global Diabetes Compact and the targets is now gone. And that is really not good news at all. So I just I don't want to steal any time from you, Mark, but I cannot avoid saying that, time is very short now. So we are at a stage where there probably will be one more sort of convening of the permanent missions to look into the language again. And then, if they then agree, it will go for something called silent consultation. So, meaning that what they believe is the final draft will then be shared among all member states. Of course, we can make changes even at that stage, but that's much more difficult. So if, really the time is now for the next 10, 5, 6 days, something like that. And how can you do that? The only way is to actually influence your national government, those who are actually participating in developing the language, that the ministries of health or ministry of foreign affairs, those who are active in the negotiation, and provide them with language. So it's very important to, just now as I scan through this document, is that it's 6 mentioning of diabetes, and I think it's very good on the sort of setting the scene. It should have been mentioning type 1 because other rare diseases are mentioned, and I have personally managed to get the childhood cancer in there. So it is possible to push for things. So type 1 should be mentioned. That would be a very strong message to the world, actually. So they could mention rare diseases like sickle cell disease, type 1 diabetes, childhood cancer, etc., etc. That's a way. Of course, it's not a very strong language, but at least it's mentioned. So that is still possible. And then I think you should push for the link, as you were saying, James, to the Global Diabetes Compact, and especially the targets that was decided by the World Health Assembly. That would be the best, and that would really be helpful, because then you have a red thread from the prime ministers, from the heads of states through the Ministry of Health, and we all know that we can sort of call on them to make reports on these targets. So it is still time, but you need to work very systematically, and you cannot get everything. So you have to be quite sort of focused. What is the most important? Is it to get the Global Diabetes Compact mentioned? Because if you do that, all the other things will actually fall in place. So that's not a bad strategy. Or to push for the targets that was agreed through the World Health Assembly, at least that they are mentioned as they were in one of the first drafts. So this is important, and you should also work through the NCD Alliance. They are very impactful, but most important is actually your own governments.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's a lot there, and not a lot of time to do that. So the final question, I guess, for both of you is, and I've seen this both my question, but I'm also getting, text and stuff like that. Practically speaking, practically speaking, what can the people here do to ensure things like the global diabetes targets of 100% of people living with type 1 having access to insulin and blood glucose self-monitoring? Practically speaking, how do we do that? I understand that does depend on which country, but practically speaking, what advice maybe Mark and then Bente could you offer us?
Yeah, while Bente was speaking, I was just thinking, James, what we as a group here in this meeting can do together. So I don't know if you feel that we can write together an open letter and publish online, and each one of us help to mark their member states, their ministers of health, their head of states, etc. So showing them this collective letter, so asking for so including the global diabetes targets and the mention to type 1 diabetes in the political declaration. But and as Bente said, so and if you receive the communications from NCD Alliance, it seems that we have only 4 days for that because apparently the meeting for the decision will be on July 30th. So it's very short, but I think maybe it's something that will be very important if you get that. But from my side, I should also emphasize, James, that as you know, so we have been, and many here have been collaborating with the global coordination mechanism on NCDs for meaningful engagement of people living with NCDs and mental health conditions. And this was another aspect that we missed in the zero draft. And even as Forum CCNTs, this is one of the main points that we brought to the attention of our Minister of Health, that so the resolution that was the pass in the 2024 for social participation. So no, it was not mentioned. So social participation was not included in the zero draft, and we know that meaningful engagement is more granular than social participation. Is inside social participation, but we understand that it is important also that it is that the social participation with meaningful engagement of people living with the condition is there also is cited in the political declaration, because I don't think anybody here disagree that we should always be involved in the decisions that will lead to a better and healthier health system for everyone living with diabetes and other non-communicable conditions. So yeah, and NCD Alliance prepare also a template, so it's in the website. We can share the website. Lucia is the specialist here, the big representative of our views, our voices of NCD Alliance, so she can share that. I think that's useful, but that's not specifically about those topics. So I believe we as a group can also build another letter with those topics that we can so each one send to our Minister of Health, our head of state, but also as an open letter, so marking everyone, tagging everyone in social media, everyone that has decision power for this. I think that would be useful if we find that it's possible.
Okay, so I got from that, Mark, ways of getting it in. So we should be focusing on the inclusion of type 1, should be focused on the inclusion of the targets. We can link up with the available resources at the NCD Alliance, and I think there are going to be some links being dropped on that. Try to get involved in the political process in your own country, whether that's a Minister of Health or another is probably Minister of Foreign Affairs. And but then Bente, what else? So I should say for people who don't know Bente, Bente is probably the best person in the world to ask this. as you've been at the center of the whirlwind of these sort of negotiations before, being at the WHO and at the NCD department director. So, yeah, practically speaking, I mean, it sounds like the window is closing, but it's not shut yet. So, what can we do here?
No, I think Mark's point of an open letter. I think one of the tricks is not to ask for the world. I mean, and NCD Alliance can also help. I mean, the best for a government because they don't actually necessarily know how to deal with things. They want to do good, and then they don't really know necessarily how to put the language. So I think if you can focus on, as you said, get the mentioning of type 1, I would say link diabetes to the humanitarian. It's a couple of paragraphs on humanitarian there, vulnerable people. Get the Global Diabetes Compact and the targets linked in a way. And I think the more sort of single voice that is possible, joint voices, the better it is. So if all the organizations on this call and also, everyone else in the space can sort of agree on a call to action, publish it, use the LinkedIn, X and whatever, Blue Sky, whatever, and push it like that. And I also like the idea of tagging, the different governments, but then also use your contacts. You have connections. Many of you have been in the field for a long while, you know somebody in the Ministry of Health or in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you give them a call, you send them an email. That is the way. And then if you have connections with the civil society in New York, and again, I would say NCDA is really helpful. Of course, they have a lot of things that they need to take care of, all the different diseases, neurological diseases, mental health, and so on. So they will always have the broadest sort of interest. So that's why, also you have, and rightfully so, I would say, a strong interest for diabetes. So you need to push for that. If you have seen, I mean, Tom Frieden actually have been campaigning for the last 3-4 months to get the inclusion of hypertension into the political declaration. He's managed to get that. I mean, it's not only him, but it's a typical thing. If you look at his LinkedIn, you will see the call for action, and that's the way to do it, I think. There is no other way. Unfortunately, I think, the facts, the burden, the rapid development, the dire situation, also, the sort of the link to different risk factors, everything is there. And also to social determinants of health, everything is known. So it's just to get these, let's say, links back to what we know already was a big gain, namely the Global Compact, the targets, getting type 1 sort of into the visibility space is very important.